Pokemon games are so unique, each telling a story enriched with a lot of history behind them, especially when it's your first time playing it. Your nostalgia continues to build for those games over time, and you have such a deep connection with them that they become super memorable. Just take a second and remind yourself of the first time you played a Pokemon game and all the memories that you went through. It's great stuff, and ultimately leads to many diverse profiles when someone discusses their first time playing the games and what they themselves went through. It's all just so interesting to me, but something that I thought to myself regarding this, if it was their first time playing through a Pokemon game, did they find it difficult? Let's take a dive into what we're going to be talking about today. The concept of difficulty in Pokemon games is oftentimes one of the most heavily discussed topics of the series. Are the games actually difficult, or are they actually just that easy? But before we define what the difficulty is that is in question, we have to ask ourselves what exactly makes the topic so controversial. Level spikes. First, let's define what level spikes even means. The progression of opposing trainers' Pokemon levels as you complete certain milestones. We'll use Pokemon Diamond and Pearl for example. The 8th gym leader Volkner has a Luxray being his ace on the team at level 49. After defeating Volkner and making your way to the Elite Four, you'll end up facing Cynthia's level 66 Garchomp. Given the XP distribution from Sunyshore City up until this point of the game, there's not much to close the huge gap of levels for you to be up to par with what you will be facing, historically making Cynthia one of the most difficult fights in the entire franchise. A point brought up constantly is the philosophy of players not knowing how to play Pokemon games properly as kids, and as they grow older, they understand the game more, making it easier for them to play. Making the statement later on saying that Pokemon games are easy. I dislike this argument a lot actually. The challenge barrier existed. You didn't know how to overcome it, making the game hard for you to beat. It's like diving into a horror game for the first time and you're having difficulty completing it because the monsters or ghosts that come to get you out of nowhere are constant. Then you play the game again, and now you know what to expect, therefore making your playthrough easier, so that you can also claim that horror games are easy as well. How does this relate? Because the logic also applies to the discussion at hand. You weren't ready to face the level spike progression in your Pokemon game, making it difficult. Your next attempt you know how to prepare better, and now your playthrough just got a bit easier, but it was difficult for you to begin with. However, every Pokemon game is situational. I used Diamond and Pearl as an example to show the difficulty, but let's take Pokemon X and Y. Those games are ridiculously easy. You have the newly buffed XP share, the solid pool of Pokemon that you can catch to add to your team, very reasonable and to an extent easy matchups against opposing trainers, and other elements that ultimately led to one of the easiest champion battles of all time. It makes you wonder how we went from Black and White 2's progression difficulty to this in X and Y. And by the way, I know for a fact many of you really struggled against Volo in Legends Arceus. That game was recognized by many to be almost balanced yet difficult game to be added to the series. Even after playing it once, and you know what to expect for next time, I don't think you're going to 6-0 Volo still. Did you think I forgot about Pokemon Colosseum and XD Gale of Darkness? Were your levels on your team up to par to fight Ibis? Were you also ready to fight Grievo with the added challenge of capturing all the Shadow Pokemon as well? Let's say for the sake of argument you said yes, which I assume most of you have. If you had to constantly heal your team during these specific boss fights, was your team actually ready? Which brings us to another point. Item usage during your playthroughs. It's 100% fair to be using items during your playthroughs. You have items available to you for a reason. With that said, can you agree that depending on the boss fight, if you're using an excessive amount of items during the battle, then does that make you underprepared? Because if your team was prepared, I would think you wouldn't be spamming full restores and revives as much. Every player plays the way they like. There's no definitive way to play Pokemon games at all. From the Pokemon you choose to the items you use in battle, they all play a factor in your experience during a playthrough. Perhaps the concept of strategically spamming items with your underleveled team is easy for you, and that you don't find that difficult at all. So we discussed difficulty in a couple games, item usage during your playthrough, but there's one more thing I wanted to touch base on: player knowledge. Easily the biggest factor for determining the difficulty of a game. Going in blindly or going in with some knowledge already of what to expect and giving you the advantage to prepare. There's also the knowledge of Pokemon in general to take into account, such as typings, how moves work, performance of certain Pokemon, and the list goes on. Some of you are able to make Kricketune work in your Gen 4 playthrough, but little Timmy probably can't. Excadrill and Conkeldurr work really well in Generation 5, but some people might opt to go for Sawk instead. Again, there's no definitive way to play. It's just on you and what resources you collect and your fundamental knowledge of what you are working with. Do we call this a skill issue? Not necessarily. Some people like to give themselves the challenge of running unorthodox things, like myself deciding to use Plusle as opposed to Manectric and Emerald. But regardless of the matter, when people use things they like and not what knowledge they have to determine if the decision making is good or not to use, then that's where some difficulty can be taken into account. So what's the verdict in all this? Have we come to a final conclusion? Have you, the viewer, determined the answer of whether or not Pokemon games are difficult? Well, let me tell you. It's a mixture of both, actually. Some of the games in the series on paper are just more difficult than others. I presented both sides during this video, and you were probably leading towards one answer the whole time. And if you weren't, then you, the viewer, simply get it, so congratulations. For me, I struggled a bit as a kid playing Pokemon Pearl for the first time ever, also being the game that introduced me to the series. Later on, the games got easier for me because I knew what I was doing by that point, but I still acknowledge that games such as Emerald, Platinum, Black and White 2, even Ultra Sun and Moon are some difficult games, and even if I had a breeze playing them. You just ultimately need to acknowledge when challenges are presented and not spam the speed up button grinding your Pokemon on an emulator rather than taking the actual hours to grind levels with your physical console and telling people to just simply grind. Anyways, that's all I got for you guys today. Thought I'll just jump in here and just discuss this thing with you guys and see probably what are your thoughts as well that you can tell me in the comment section down below. But with that being said, have a great rest of your day. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.